The file begins. August 13th, 2026. The date of a sold-out Atlanta show. Instead of a sound check, there was only silence. The court documents were not leaked. Pause. They were published. A deliberate surgical strike against a 30-year legacy. The initial statement from his team was a masterpiece of corporate emptiness, crafted to say nothing at all. It was a single sheet of paper thrown against a hurricane of accusations. The media frenzy was predictable. A digital mob baying for a confession. What was truly chilling was the quiet. The phones that stopped ringing. The collaborators who suddenly had no comment. In the anatomy of this fall, the first symptom was not the noise of the crowd, but the absolute deafening silence of his inner circle. Pause. Usher Raymond IV, the global superstar, was suddenly, profoundly alone. The name at the core of the deposition was not Usher's. It was a ghost from a past he had tried to outrun. Pause. Sean Combs, the architect of 90s bravado, now a name spoken in whispers. The partnership began under the blinding lights of the meat grinder of fame. For a young artist from Atlanta, Combs wasn't just a producer. He was a gatekeeper to an empire. There were warnings, of course, murmurs in green rooms, quiet advice from older musicians who had seen it all before. They were dismissed, labeled as jealousy, the first fatal mistake. The documents didn't allege a crime on Usher's part, not directly. They performed a far more brutal function, a posthumous audit of his associations. Every party, every flight, every late-night studio session now recontextualized not as a stepping stone to success, but as silent complicity in another man's inventory of sins. The price of admission was loyalty. The bill was just coming due. To understand the anatomy of this fall, we must rewind the tape. Past the private jets, past the diamond-encrusted monikers, back to the humid crucible of Chattanooga, and then Atlanta. The origin story is not one of privilege. It is a case file of relentless, calculated ambition, authored chiefly by his mother, Jonetta Patton. She was the first CEO of Usher Raymond IV. His voice, discovered in a church choir, was not merely a gift from God. It was an asset, a raw material to be refined and leveraged. The family's move to Atlanta was not a migration. It was an investment, a strategic repositioning on the chessboard of the music industry. The early performances, the local talent shows, the relentless practice. These were not childhood hobbies. They were stress tests of the product. The appearance on Star Search at age 13 was the initial public offering. He lost. A footnote often erased from the official biography, but a crucial piece of evidence. Defeat taught a more valuable lesson than victory. It taught that talent alone was insufficient. One needed an apparatus. A machine. Pause. And a machine requires an architect. The machine found its architect in New York, a city that smells of ambition and concrete dust. L.A. Reid was the first name on the contract, but the shadow that fell over the entire enterprise belonged to his new head of A&R. Pause. Sean Combs. Puff Daddy. He was building an empire not on music, but on a lifestyle, a brand of untouchable champagne-soaked bravado. The mentorship was immediate, symbiotic. Combs needed a fresh face, a vessel for his sound, someone with genuine R&B talent to legitimize the swagger. Usher needed the system, the bad boy finishing school. He was taught the uniform, the baggy jeans, the platinum chains, the precise angle of a fitted cap. He was taught the walk, the talk, the silent signs of power, The warnings were not written. They were atmospheric. They were in the faces of the entourage that moved like a phalanx through nightclubs. They were in the hushed conversations that stopped the moment you entered a room. They were in the casual cruelty dismissed as the cost of business. For a teenager from Atlanta, this was the language of kings. He learned to speak it fluently, never questioning the grammar. It was the price of the throne, a down payment on a future he was told he deserved. That future had a cost, payable in installments of willful ignorance. The first invoice arrived at 3 a.m. on a cold December night in 1999. Club New York, gunshots echoing off velvet ropes and terrified screams. The mentor, Pause Combs, was at the center of the storm. It wasn't just a brawl, it was a schism. A moment when the carefully constructed facade of untouchable glamour was pierced by the brute reality of consequence. For Pause Usher, the violence was at a distance, but the shadow it cast was long. The brand he wore was now stained with gunpowder. The questions started. Quietly at first, then louder. The swagger that once looked like power now had the faint, metallic scent of desperation. This was the anatomy of complicity, not in the act itself, but in the silence that followed, in continuing to stand next to the throne as its foundations began to publicly rot. Each hit record, each sold-out show was now layered over a growing whisper, a quiet accounting of who was there and who said nothing. The whispers have now become a sworn testimony, a digital tomb unsealed by court order. The Rodney Jones lawsuit. It is not a story of music, it is an inventory of sins, cataloged with the cold precision of a legal filing. Page after page details a world of grotesque appetites and coercive power, hidden behind the gates of wealth. The mentor's empire is revealed not as a kingdom, but as a bunker, a soundproof chamber for horrors. And then the ink turns to poison. The association is no longer atmospheric, it is documented. The filings allege parties. They allege acts. They allege a revolving door of artists and influencers who saw. And in this ledger of the damned, a familiar name appears. Pause Usher Raymond IV. Not as an accused, but as something arguably more chilling. A presence, a witness, a part of the scenery while the rot set in. The price of the throne was proximity. Now that proximity is a permanent exhibit in a public record of disgrace. His legacy, once written in platinum records, is now footnoted in a document that will outlive any melody. That footnote did not remain in the quiet archives of the court. It was Xeroxed by the machinery of outrage. The information spilled from the sealed world of legal filings into the chaotic bazaar of social media. It was an anatomy of digital decay. The dry procedural language was translated into screaming headlines, each more lurid than the last. Usher named. Inside the parties. What did he see? The name, once a synonym for smooth choreography and platinum sales, became a tag. A keyword tethered to a narrative of filth and power abuse. The public's perception did not shift. It fractured. The man who defined an era of R&B was now just a character in a much darker, more compelling drama. His own story was over. He was now part of the Pause Combs scandal. The brand was not just damaged, it was contaminated. The verdict arrived before any trial. It was not delivered by a jury, but by a million anonymous commentators. This is the new justice. Swift, brutal, and permanent. The case against him was not built on evidence, but on proximity. Guilt by association. A social sentence for which there is no appeal. Legally, his name was a footnote, a witness, a tertiary figure. But in the court of public opinion, silence is an admission. Presence is participation. His fatal mistake was not an alleged act, but a documented inaction. A loyalty to the throne that now looks like complicity with the rot beneath it. He stood next to the fire. He did not sound the alarm. He just enjoyed the warmth. Now the shadow of that bunker, that soundproofed room of horrors, follows him onto every stage. He can perform the hits. He can execute the dance moves. But the audience is no longer just watching a show. Pause. They are searching his eyes for the ghosts he saw. The exile was not a formal decree. It was a change in atmospheric pressure. The phone, once a relentless engine of opportunity, now lay silent on polished marble countertops. A digital tombstone. Invitations to galas and private viewings were replaced by the hollow echo of an empty inbox. Old friends developed sudden, chronic scheduling conflicts. Their polite evasions were colder than any outright rejection. He was now radioactive, a contaminant. On stage, he was a king presiding over an empire of screaming subjects. He could summon fire and light. He could make 20,000 people move as one. But the moment the house lights came up, the empire dissolved. The king was just a man in a silent hotel suite, staring at the city below. A city that no longer wanted him. Pause. The loneliness of the global tour is a special kind of damnation, surrounded by millions, but touched by none. And so begins the final inventory, a post-mortem audit of a living legend. The assets, 3 decades of hits, a catalog that defined a generation, a body that still defies the laws of physics. The liabilities, a single catastrophic error of judgment, the sin of proximity, the crime of silence. His tour, titled Past, Present, Future, has become an ironic document. The past is contaminated. The present is a performance of denial. The future is a negotiation with ghosts. He can continue this path, the path of the polished automaton, flawlessly executing the hits while the rot spreads underneath. Or he can seek a different kind of stage, the witness stand, the confessional. But the machine that built him does not reward confession. It only replaces the faulty part. His legacy is no longer a monument to talent. It is a case study, a bitter testament to the fact that in the kingdom of manufactured dreams, loyalty to the throne is absolute. Pause. Until the throne itself is condemned.